There we go. Namaste, everyone. It is me, Nina Sachs, with you from Yoga Awakening Africa. And today I am delighted to be speaking to a friend from years ago, Brian Bergman, who now runs Awake Human Being, awakehumanbeing.com. So is that right?
Yep.
Cool. So if anyone wants to kind of like check out your website while we're chatting, at least they can like head over there already. And there's lots to see and delve into. So Brian, why don't you kind of like maybe get the listeners, give them an insight as to kind of like maybe how we met, how our journey began, and then kind of like how you got hooked into yoga all those years ago.
Yeah, I've been involved with the yogic tradition for so long now, since about 2000. Um,
So one of the first kind of like diehards in the Cape Town yoga realm way back when like there were 3 or 4 studios that you had to drive at least 20 minutes to or half an hour to before you could get anywhere or get to
yeah,
yoga. Now it's kind of like, around every corner there's a little studio
yeah,
or
yeah,
practice or whatever the story is. But so yeah,
yeah,
it's
there's definitely,
2000,
yeah.
it's a little while back, 20 odd years, hey?
Yeah, I mean, I discovered a fairly good sort of tradition of yoga that I went to go study in India for a year at this ashram in Bihar. That was the Satyananda yoga tradition, which was of the Shivananda lineage. And then we came back and started a yoga studio for about 10 years in Sea Point, the Satyananda Yoga Center there. And then that eventually kind of closed around 2010. But one of the limbs that we continued to propagate was the Seva yoga, which I think that's how we met. Like looking at the difference, sort of taking yoga into various places and spaces that it wouldn't otherwise have reached, and looking at where we could use it as an intervention for good, and for service. So that led to another project that ran for about 10 years, which was the prison, the yoga in prisons project. Um, I don't remember what we called it now. The prison, I think it was like the prison yoga project, something like that, PFP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
And I mean that you were doing
yeah,
like Polesmore out in Worcester. I mean you guys were getting around with that and really doing good work.
yeah. We were teaching in about 4 different correctional centers, Polesmore being our main one, and Malmesbury being probably our second most common one. And then we were also out like, Brunfley, Worcester, and there were a couple around Wellington as well that we were doing, but we also ran a correspondence course. And we had quite a big reach into maybe another 10 other facilities where guys were teaching themselves yoga through our correspondence.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately would lead them to becoming doing the teacher's training or the facilitator training. We used to call it the peer instructors course. So they would teach other inmates what they had learned in the sort of introduction to yoga course that we were offering. It was like a 6-module course, and they were through correspondence. And so at one point we had maybe 20 sort of guys that had gone through the peer instructors course, and probably about 300 others that were doing the yoga teachers, well, not the yoga teachers training, just the yoga courses
Yeah.
that we offer.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah.
And like you were saying, kind of like when COVID hit and you were getting, struggling with correctional for services and government, like that's kind of like, being put to bed for a little while now. But, while it was there and out there, you guys were doing amazing, amazing work with that. And I think
Yeah, it was
really
a great project. Yeah,
impacted
really
so many.
loved it.
Yeah. So kind of like Brian, kind of like when I started traveling and moving about, kind of like I lost touch with like what you guys were doing, and somehow like I came across you again. Who was it? One of your dance people, I think, mentioned, you should get hold of Brian and get him on the interview. And I was like, okay, well, what happened? Because all of a sudden it was like yoga, and then I hear like you're doing dance. Like, and how did that evolve? What happened there? And how does like a Satyananda yoga teacher who's devoted in that kind of like tradition find dance, use dance, and now that is kind of like your baby, apart from being a
Yeah,
vet as well.
apart from being a vet, yeah. Yeah, that was That started in about probably 2012. I was going through a very, very difficult time in life, and I couldn't bring myself to doing sort of formal yoga practice or sitting down and getting on the mat. I couldn't do any of that. I just wasn't in the right sort of headspace. But what I could do was drag myself to a conscious dance class twice a week and dance. And that helped a lot. It helped, I was going through sort of a period of separation from my partner and divorce, and in sort of the depths of despair and grief and depression. And so it was very hard to actually motivate or self-motivate, but the dancing really, really helped. So for 2 hours of the week, I would come up for air from this whole process. And it was the only thing that really helped. I tried various therapy and stuff like that, but I'm just too good at talking. So like verbal therapy, I'm not grateful.
And I think what you're saying is really important, because, a lot of people, if they're going through a hard time, often people say, oh, go to a yoga class, it'll help calm you down and whatnot. And sometimes it just actually isn't helpful to sit and be with your thoughts and, to be in that space. Sometimes movement and being a little bit more physical and doing something different is actually more beneficial.
Yeah. I mean, the dancing really helps you to express emotion and feeling, because you're not trying to sort of get rid of it or change it or move it away, but it's a way of really being able to look at it without having to name it or intellectualize what's happening or describe what's happening, but to actually just be with the feeling of it and to find movement for it. And that naturally comes because the music helps you to move, because you've got that sort of going on as a muse in the background. And what I discovered there is just about every feeling, including depression and grief, have movement and have expression. And once you start to move it, then they change. Because movement is change, like the minute you've moved from one thing to another, you're different. So that really, really helped. And then I went back to the ashram in 2017. Okay, well, after that, I went and got trained as a conscious dance facilitator in Dancing Freedom. I spent a month in Bali doing a training, and I came back and I started to teach the dance. And the dance is what I was kind of offering to sort of so-called normal society called folk, and then continuing with the prison yoga projects. So I was teaching yoga inside the prisons, which was my audience. Those were my students. I really, really enjoyed the interactions that I had with a lot of the inmates, and I could really, really enjoy watching how good yoga was. So something like dance would not work well in prison because it's not structured enough. And then, you can't control the space like that because it's a little bit more wild than you as your mat, and that's the four corners of it, and that's where you stay. So yoga has a better application in prison than I think the dance would have. But I started to teach the dance, and then I went to the ashram in 2017 to visit my teacher there, Swami Niranjan, and partake in the festival that was happening at the ashram at the time, which is this beautiful invocation of the Divine Mother over 5 days. And they do a lot of service, and you just get involved in helping and outreach into the villages and stuff like that. But in one of the mornings of the actual festival, and it was all just starting and the sun was coming up and it was just quiet and peaceful, and these two Sikhs were just getting started with some bhajans. I had like a kind of like a download or a vision of how to teach the dance, and how to basically, I had the vision of a awake human being, and what to do and what to teach and what to bring forth and how to. And I could see the whole thing. So I've basically just been unfolding that vision since then. And I'd say that, like, in my mind, the conscious dance that I teach is not any different from yoga. It's a form of yoga. It's based on the same principles that underpin, all the asanas and breathing practices and everything else that we do in yoga, except that we're just doing it through dance and movement. So we're harnessing these two technologies of the moving embodied authentic movement, and then music. Turns out to be a very, very powerful medium for our psyche. So the combination for me has just been sort of fairly radical, and I've been really, really enjoying teaching it. And out of it developed something called Dance Awake, which is the modality that I now teach and train people in. And that is really, its roots are in the yogic system. Like, if you look at, besides, like, if you go to a class, you'll just see like dancing people to dancing to great music, and it's all, like it's that on the surface, but underneath all of that is principles that are really rooted in that deep presence that we're trying to cultivate through yoga practice, and that awakening that we're trying to create within our being, by getting to know ourselves more intimately through embodied practice. So yeah, I've just basically dressed it up in the form of conscious dance.
Awesome. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions there that I want to unpack so that I can understand it better, because this is a completely new field for me. I love dancing.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, always been there. No, it hasn't always been there. I was one of those who was very, very nervous and self-conscious dance. I would never have danced like at school or just at varsity. But then kind of like at some point it was like, oh, screw this. I'm just going to like dance my feelings, or be silly or whatnot. And then it, like you were saying in your video on your website, kind of like if you kind of are silly with your dancing, it opens up the floor for others to join in, and it makes it like less formal and stringent. Okay, but that's an aside. Kind of like what I wanted to ask is kind of like, okay, so like how is conscious dance different from normal dance or dancing? And then how is your version of awake dancing and different from conscious dance?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, as you've seen and know about in the yogic world, there's yoga and there's yoga, and there's different. It's taught at various depths depending on who's teaching it and what their training is, and like you're going to get a very different class from someone who's like studied yoga very deeply, and has really gone into it and has their own practice, and brings out more of the depth of it, and then as opposed to someone who's done a weekend teacher's training and is now teaching yoga, and that's going to be another kind of experience. And it's the same in the conscious dance world. It's there's lots of different modalities and lots of different people doing it, but what makes conscious dance conscious, I guess, is that it's not like a party. It's not like you're not going there to meet people, to pick people up, to show off your moves on the dance floor, or just to go and have a fun time at a party and to take lots of drugs so that you can dance all night. It's conscious, so we don't do any drugs, or you're not inebriated. You actually are trying to cultivate presence, and deepen your awareness and attention, and become sort of more open and curious about the experience you're having, and then to take that, instead of how we normally are, which is just think about these sorts of things, we actually let the body move these things. And then through that, the body brings or unpacks its own wisdom and intelligence, and your intuitive faculties start to come out and play through the movement. So it's actually a really sort of like a pretty decent modality. I like it in terms of yoga to the original yogis, the people who came up with all the asanas and all the postures and all the techniques and stuff. They had nothing of their own. They didn't have a book. They didn't have, like the Iyengar's book on this and that, and, or the Asana Pranayama Mudra Bandha book to follow. And in a way, they were, as a result, a lot more free to be experimental with their own being and body. And that's what they did. They would go out in recluse, and they would just sit and explore, like, what does it do and what happens to my body and the energy flowing in my body when I put it into this position, and I become present to that and start to feel the flows that are going on. And so they then codified yoga. So conscious dance kind of like is that original yoga, where you are free to move however you feel to move, but the trick is not to bypass anything, not to deny the experience that you're having. So with Dance Awake, we invite people to start where they are, whatever state you've arrived at the class in is the beginning of the dance. So if you're happy, great. If you're sad, also awesome. Whatever state you're in, if you're feeling full of energy or if you're feeling low energy, you don't try to dance like you've got a lot of energy. If you don't, you honor the fact that you're actually feeling low energy, because that brings its own kind of movement. And that's a different kind of movement to someone who's full of energy and dancing, in a bigger kind of way like that. I was wondering, what was the rest of the question?
I love it. So, well, I mean, I was just kind of like trying to define the difference between like normal dance, like at a dance party, conscious dance, and then kind of like how you are defining kind of like what you're teaching with how you're bringing the essence of yoga into that.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, a normal dance, you can go and dance anywhere. You can take what you want, you can drink what you want, you can move how you want. You can be as self-conscious as you want. You can love it, you can hate it. But with the conscious dance, we follow certain guidelines, and the main two guidelines, which are the pillars of the practice, is to stay present, and to make effort to be present with whatever it is that you're experiencing, and then to keep moving. So whatever it is that you're noticing within your body, whether it's a hard emotion or a pleasurable feeling or whatever it may be, and then interacting with the music, you then move it or move with it, and you invite the body to lead you in the dance, so that it actually starts to unfold its own vocabulary of movement, which is different to how you would normally mince if you were at a dance floor and like in your habit of like, yeah, we're all going to listen to house music for the next 8 hours, and it's going to be 128 beats per minute, like regularly, and it's going to sound more or less the same, and there's a way of dancing to it, and everyone's going to dance that way. Whereas with the conscious dance, we multi-genre. We play music from all kinds of genres, music you'll like, music you'll hate. And the trick is, how do you move with something like you like drum and bass? If you've never danced to drum and bass, how do you dance to drum and bass? And instead of like having that like in your mind, I can't dance to this, you go, how can I dance to this? And then you ask the body that, and then you don't have to think about it. The body will find a way to do it. It'll pick up on certain elements, and you learn to move. And obviously that has a direct translation into your normal life, in the sense that like, if I can, before I couldn't dance to drum and bass, and now I can dance to drum and bass. If in my job I couldn't previously have that conversation with my boss, now I can. Do you know what I mean? Like it gives you, because you've awakened some aspect of your being that now knows how to move like that, or move, in that way. So it has a very direct correlation into normal life, the conscious dance, what we then resolving and sorting out through our body. So how it ties into yoga, or at least like the Dance Awake, is that we look at various maps that we use, and the maps that we use to explore the dance are yogic maps. So the 5 sheets, or the 5 koshas of yoga, is a very big map that is used in the Dance Awake system, in that we sometimes have an experience of just the physical body. So like the first kosha, the physical body. And then you're dancing, and all you're doing is you're paying attention, you're staying present to like the heat in the body, the coolness, the stiffness, the tightness, the pain, the prickling, itching sensations, or tired in the body, whatever that may be. And based on that awareness of what you're feeling, you then move. So that we call somatic movement, or physical movement. Then you have the next kosha up from there would be, say, the energy body. And that's like getting into that sense of your body's vitality and its sense of flow, and the energy as you sense it. So we learn to become sensitive to how the energetics of the body are feeling, and we move accordingly in our dance, following that premise of it's called, we call it ecstatic movement, where you may not become ecstatic through the movement, but you'll feel better than you were before, because you've got your energy flowing a little bit better. So maybe you've moved from depression to being calm. Maybe you've moved from angry to being happy, like, because you've like followed it. You've started with the anger, you've expressed it, it's made you do all these hard shapes, balling your hands into fists and shaking them. Then the hands start to open, energy starts to flow in a different way. So in that way we move with our energy body. And then it's likewise with the mind, the mental body. We start to look at, what am I thinking about? What thoughts are prevailing in the brain? And I let them drop into the body as movement. So instead of thinking further like on that chain of thought, I now move it. So the body is expressing that thinking. And
it
then
doesn't
it
get
opens
caught
up.
up within. It's kind of like you're saying,
No,
it's moved out, because a
yeah,
lot of people are busy in their minds. Like they're constantly thinking, they've got like the monkey minds going on, and they struggle to meditate. They say, I can't meditate because my mind is so busy. And like you're saying, if you can actually move and dance with it, and you allow that thought to be present, and you work it out, probably create like a lot of calmness and stillness in the mind.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great way to process things that you haven't been able to resolve, that you're getting stuck in your head with. It's a great way of processing stuff. And at the same time, once you've kind of done a bit of that processing, it becomes creative. You start to take that thinking, and it moves to the next level of like, how can I actually create with this particular mental state? And so it goes on like that. And then there's the psychic body. So that would be what we call shamanic dance. And in the psychic body, you get to interact with like all your archetypes, your myths, your stories, your legends, dancing like a lion, dancing the warrior, like embodying these archetypes that bring in a certain feeling in the body that you also, again, like if you have danced the dance of a warrior, like if you think about a great example of it is the All Black rugby team, they dance that haka at the beginning. Now they're invoking through a fairly choreographed piece of movement, they're invoking the warrior energy. And you can see it in them when they're authentically moving in it, they become strong and powerful, that they seem it and they feel it in their being, and you read it in their body language. And that's the same kind of thing that one encounters in their own dance. It's like you start to go, well, what strength am I embodying now? And what does it look like? And is it a lion or is it an eagle or whatever? But that, again, once you've found it in your being and your cells know it, in your normal life, when you're negotiating the raise with your boss, you bring that warrior energy and like that strength. So you don't get walked all over, but you stand your ground. And so it just gets deeper and deeper. But the whole principle behind the conscious dance is that of wanting to ultimately wake up. So to access more and more of the dormant potential that stays or lies within us, and to begin to become playful and curious about that experience and what is there, and then to let it all unfold through the dancing. And obviously the more you dance, the deeper it goes. I haven't got to the bottom of the bucket yet.
I'm sure there's I'm sure it's like with yoga, like there's plenty.
Yeah, no, there's no end to it. Yeah.
And but it's just a journey that is enjoyable. Well, I mean, journeys aren't always enjoyable, but they're growth oriented. They kind of like have the growth path and the depth path, and kind of like once we've gone into the depth, then we really can go bounce back into the growth. And it's just, that's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like that's conscious dance gives that opportunity as well. I love how you've managed to like merge the two with regards to kind of like bringing in the yoga philosophy to that, because I think that brings in another deeper layer aspect to it.
Well, the yoga, like to me, the way I found yoga was before I got into yoga, I was exploring all kinds of things. I had like read Carlos Castaneda, I had done some Reiki. I was looking and seeking and bringing together a whole lot of information that I had, but no real understanding. And when I discovered yoga, what I love about yoga is that yoga puts an umbrella over everything. It codifies it into a system that makes sense. It's like, oh, that's a practice for your heart. That's a practice for your mind. That's a practice for the energy. That one is good for your body's health. So depending on your nature and your personality, you start to like pick the practices that you need at that particular time to move and work with what you're moving and working with. But it's all within this beautiful system. And so the conscious dance fits right in there. It's not like even foreign. I'm sure if I had to go and speak to Swami Ranjan about it, he would go, yep, pretty much like that. And so maybe that's where Dance Awake is slightly different from some of the other conscious dance modalities out, is that it does have this incredible depth of yogic philosophy behind it, or a tradition behind it. Whereas a lot of them, like, because people come and they look and they think they can do it, like, oh, I don't need any training, I'll just play music and everyone will dance. But there actually is quite a depth to the work and a methodology that's followed behind it that most people wouldn't see, but they would feel the effect. And it's the same in a yoga class. Like when you go to a yoga class of a yoga teacher who has, lived the life, the way they transmit the teachings through their words and through the way they hold their body and the way they teach it is you feel it, So this is a yoga teacher that I can bow down to and be very respectful of. And then you go to some others where it's like, oh my God, I can't believe I've just heard that person say that. It's kind of like, it's like follow your bliss, or jump around like it's like fake it to make it. Don't look at that shadow. No, we don't need that. But what I like about the conscious dance is it embraces everything. It's like, if you come in a foul, dark, horrible state, awesome. It's like, as long as you can just be there and not judge that state and allow it to be, it's going to move, and you're going to move with it. And then you're going to learn that you can create in the darkest of places. You can actually emerge quite victorious from that territory, like when you're walking in those deep valleys of darkness, you remember it's like, oh, I'm not this, I'm just moving through it. So
I think that's an important aspect for a lot of people with regards to realizing like that whatever their emotion, whatever the situation is, that's not them. It's just them moving through it. It's so lovely to hear, that dance does give that another option. It's another modality someone can try, because there's so many people who have issues and challenges, and they've gone to Pilates, and they've gone to a physio, and they've gone to a chiropractor, and they've gone to this, and they've gone to TOE, and they've done the yoga, and they're just coming out, they've done everything. And the other thing is like, well, have you tried conscious dance? If not, maybe try, because you never know. It could just be what you need at that time
I've seen a lot of people go through, like over the years that I've been teaching, like even in that little hour and a half class, like people who have been like melted on the floor in a puddle of tears, and others who are like practically having an orgasm on the dance floor. Like it allows and caters to this great range of human experience in a non-judgmental space where people aren't looking at you and going, oh, you're a nice dancer. No one actually really cares. Everyone's pretty much in their own process and in their own dance, moving with the story that is their life. But the beautiful thing about it is that it provides you with that space to have that conversation, and that conversation is not mental. It's a very much an embodied somatic experience, and then you go, wow, like, could I actually live like this? Like, do I really need this mind to like hit the wall all the time, or can I just like dance around it, and through it? So it definitely, like, I rate it very highly as a modality for both therapy and for creativity. And a lot of people go, oh no, I can't dance. But like, I mean, even doing this is a dance, it's like it doesn't have to look like anything. You don't have to look like Michael Jackson or a ballerina. And a lot of people who have been formally trained as dancers, like, come to them and they go, oh my God, like I can just do whatever I want. Really? Like, and I'm like, yeah, just whatever you feel to do and however you feel to move, it's kind of welcome. And you start to cultivate a relationship to your body where you begin to understand it and its language of movement. And that's quite beautiful as well. And you also get to see it with others. Like when you're seeing another person moving in their authentic expression, without there ever being an exchange of words, you'll understand where that person is. So it helps to develop that beautiful sensitivity, not only to one's own inner experience, but to the world around us as well. So it does have that like depth that yoga has as well.
Yeah. Brian, I mean, we could go on and on and on and chat like a whole day further. So I think we definitely need to organize another one of these chats, because I would really love to dive deeper into kind of like some of the stories of like what people have gone through and experienced, and kind of like the benefits of this. So maybe we need to schedule another call to do that, if you're open to that.
For sure.
But in the meantime, like apart from awakehumanbeing.com, like what do you have on your website? Where can people connect with you? How can they get to a class with you and really experience?
The website has got information, like got all the information. So even the dances, I teach every Thursday at the Claremont Hall in Cape Town. So that's from 6:30 to 8:30. But the details are there on the website. I teach a retreat, 7-day conscious dance silent retreat for 7 days, twice a year. That's on the website. And then also on the website, if you're too afraid to make it to a class, but you want to try the practice, then there's an academy on the website that you can subscribe to. And there's a vast amount of practices, from like 15-minute dances, 45-minute dances, to like 2-hour practices.
Oh, wow. So like people like me who live remote, we can like still benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually do broadcast the Thursday class as well online.
Oh, wow.
So people tune in from all over the world and dance with us over that time. And I do that through my Mixcloud account, but that you can also find through the website. If you go to the Dance Away classes, the link will be there for that.
Okay. So there's no excuse for us not to get dancing.
No excuse.
Awesome. Love it. All right, Brian, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming online. So lovely to see you again. And we'll definitely have another one of these sometime soon.
Awesome. Cheers.